going on, Washington Commanders Nation? It's your boy Rio Robinson back with my first Rio rant for the Commanders Kings YouTube channel. Shout out to my guys Louis T, Street Scores, and the real Ed Oliver. My rant for week 15 of the Washington Commanders is all about dispelling the myth of the Chase Young revenge game versus Washington, because I do see the narrative coming out there and it comes off very snarky and sarcastically for me, because what in the entire hell would Chase need to get revenge from in Washington? He was propped up, lauded, and coddled for years here. And the story about Chase Young, let's take it back to its origin. You know, the guys, DeMatha, DC, DMV boy through and through, and the most home run, easy pick to start the Ron Eugene Rivera era in DC. I remember the Chase Young Bowl. I remember playing against the New York Giants late in the 2019 season for the rights. The loser of that game was going to have the right to draft Chase Young, the generationally tabbed 6'4", 264-pound generational mega talent coming out of Ohio State. Homegrown DC native coming home, because when has that not worked for Washington, right? But it wasn't where he was from that ended up messing up the situation. And everybody knew it was the pick for Washington because, one, Dan Snyder had drafted Dwayne Haskins the year before, God rest his soul. He didn't want the team to draft a quarterback the next year, but apparently Ron was given the autonomy that if he wanted to do so, he could have. And we're talking about a draft that ended up with Tua Tagovailoa, with Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, etc. We rolled with Dwayne Haskins, and we made what looked like the easiest pick. That was the COVID draft. Remember? That was the draft where Roger Goodell was sitting on his chair and a half with his Mr. Rogers sweater on, making picks in silence from his living room. And everybody knew what the pick was going to be for Washington. We were the worst kept secret going into that draft. You're talking about the winner of the Bronco Nagurski Trophy, the Chuck Bednarik Award, the Hendricks Award, unanimous All-American, Big Ten Male Athlete of the Year, Big Ten Most Valuable Player. And the year before was the Big Ten. Like, he won that first team All Big Ten. Every accolade or award you could have coming into your professional career after your collegiate career, this guy had it. A guy coming off a 13 and a half and 16 and a half sack seasons. 16 and a half sacks and 7 forced fumble coming out of his final year of Ohio State. Everybody had their Chase Young jerseys pre-ordered when he got to town. And did he disappoint? No, he did not. He got right to the shits in his rookie year with Washington. 7.5 sacks off rip. 4 forced fumbles. Plays to be made, and he became the face of the franchise because we lacked one at quarterback at the time. Chase Young became the face of the franchise in his rookie year, man. Play the Sarah McLachlan music. I will remember you. Chase Young gets the rookie of the year. I remember the San Francisco 49ers game. I remember the Carolina Panthers game. There were some great moments. And then things hit a snag in year 2. We were about 9 games into the season. Tampa Bay was in town. I believe it was Tampa Bay. It was either Tampa Bay or Kansas City. One of those juggernaut teams were in town in D.C. I was there that day. Chase Young tore his ACL, and he tore it badly. I remember me and Jalen being near Chase Young's dad, who came out the locker room. He knew immediately Chase was cooked for the season. But let's walk you back through the first 8 weeks of the season. Chase Young had only had 1.5 sacks through the first 8 weeks of the season, and I had already seen the fans doing the thing that they do here in D.C., where we turn a blind eye and we pretend that what we are seeing is not true. And we start to speak from the heart rather than speaking from our minds. And it wasn't just the sack count for Chase Young going into that injury. He only had a sack and a half through 9 weeks. It wasn't that. It wasn't that he wasn't being a sack master. The body language looked off. He never looked that in shape. And that leader that was absolutely leading this football team in his rookie year, you weren't seeing signs of that anymore. I remember being in training camp that year with my boy, shout out to Jalen. We was out at Richmond back when training camp was still there. And I remember that preseason, and I remember that training camp session. Him and Montez, they were being so lax and so chill at training camp. They were telling everybody how they were going to break the sack record as a tandem and all these things. And Washington never really got what they paid for and what they bargained for when they drafted Chase Young, because boy, did he tear that knee up. He tore it up pretty badly. Down the line, ended up getting a bad neck injury as well. And he had setbacks and re-aggravated that knee injury. So we're talking week 9 of 2021, he gets hurt. He comes back with only 3 games remaining in 2022. So we're talking more than a calendar year and some change until we see Chase Young for the first time down the stretch. And in a 3-game sample size, limited snaps and pitch count, Chase Young gave us 5 tackles, 0 sacks. So for 2 consecutive seasons, 2021 and 2022, we only saw Chase Young for 12 games. In those 12 games, the guy sacked the quarterback 1.5 times. And if you are a fan that you were paying attention to what your eyes were seeing and not viewing him like it's your child or your spouse, etc., you would have already been concerned that we maybe won't see that guy we saw our rookie year ever again. And then he goes into his contract season. You know, in a contract season, boys get busy. We saw what Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne did in their contract season. Him and Montez Sweat get off to the hottest sack production start of their season. And where does that get them? Washington ends up trading Chase Young, I believe, 8 games into the season? Let me see. 7 games into the season, Washington gets Chase Young the boot. We get him for a 2nd-round pick. We trade him and Montez Sweat for a 2nd and a conditional. And Chase Young was having his hottest start to the season. 5 sacks through 7 weeks. Were we finally going to see double-digit sack Chase Young? 10 sack in a season, Chase Young. We traded him when his stock was the highest it could get. We known about the neck injury, nerve injury, whatever they wanted to call it. We got a bunch of word soup and misdirection from Ron Rivera when it came to him. So we had known his knee was never going to be the same. Now there's nerve, neck issues, stinger. There was a stinger debacle in the preseason. Was it a stinger? Was it not a stinger? Were they not disclosing the severity of the injury? But Chase ends up getting a bunch of sacks in the first 7 weeks in the season. And mind you, when I say a bunch of sacks, 5 and 7 weeks is a bunch of sacks for Chase Young, because he has not necessarily been a sack master in his career. He has 20 sacks in his entire career. His career statistics look like one good season of Nick Bosa, one good season of Khalil Mack, one good season of TJ Watt, but I digress. He gets 5 sacks, gets to the 49ers. He had his first revenge game versus the Commanders. You know what that revenge game looked like? It looked like 1 tackle and a bunch of cardio. Yeah, he gets his pressures. He gets in the quarterback's face and makes him uncomfortable. But sadly, another case of overhype going into the draft. A good rookie year and could never find that fire again. He could never find, and an injury plagued his career, but I also think it was lack of work ethic. You know, Chase was never at the off-season workouts. He was shooting eBay commercials. I think Chase Young is a case of someone who believed in their own hype and stopped putting in the work. I think the celebrity and the things that come with being a football player are more so the priority over actual football technique and progressing your craft. And I think that's why Chase Young never hit stride to be what he was supposed to be coming into this league. And he finished up that season after getting 5 sacks in 7 games. He's got to get the double digits last year, right? Most certainly did not. He got 2.5 through the final 10 games with the San Francisco 49ers, including 0 versus Washington. And just like the Commanders did, the 49ers were not interested in Chase Young's services going forward. So he took a 1-year prove-it deal, $12 to $13 million uh, deal with the New Orleans Saints this year. And he had his best game of the season. He had a ton of pressures last week, but it's a lot more of the same. We're 15 weeks into a season, and Chase Young has 3.5 sacks. Even if you can say he's having a solid to good year with the New Orleans Saints, 99 has never turned into the Predator, the guy that he came into the league as, and therefore I do not deem any game versus Washington revenge, because what is he getting revenge on? The team treated him like royalty. They let him move around this joint like he was Scarface. They let him do his thing. They let him recover on his own timetable. And despite the fact that he was undisciplined, he didn't always do what the position entailed. Even though I know we had bad coaching here, we're talking about a guy that likes to go on solo missions and side quests when he's asked to do specific things on the field. If anybody is getting revenge out of the Chase Young situation, it would be the Washington Commanders, except we've moved on. Dante Fowler, in 14 games played, making $3 million a year, right now has more sacks in a season than Chase Young has ever had in his career. Frankie Louvu, part-time rusher, part-time off-ball backer, extraordinaire for the Commanders, has 8 sacks. That is more sacks than Chase Young has ever had in a season in his NFL career. And unless he goes crazy in the final 4 weeks of the season, he once again isn't going to touch that number. And he's probably not going to sniff 10 sacks once again in Chase Young's career. So I'm just here to dispel the myth of a revenge game, because I'm very curious what in the entire hell would Chase Young be needing revenge for. I want all our homegrown talent to prosper and to succeed. So I'm wishing him the best in New Orleans, but I'm calling it how I see it, just like I did when he was here. Fans wanted to call it hating, but sometimes you got to tell the truth. Sometimes when people show you who they are, you have to believe it. But best of luck on Sunday, and best of luck in the rest of your career endeavors, Mr. Chase Young. We're always rooting for you in our heart of hearts. But if we're being totally and completely honest, Chase Young has not lived up to hype or expectations, and I don't see revenge game being something that should be in the mental Rolodex of one Chase Young. That is all I got for right now. Make sure y'all sub up the Commanders Kings channel. We're on our way to 3,000 subscribers and beyond. We got Louis locked and loaded. We got street score stats and Ed's excited. And when it comes to breaking news, Ed's going to be doing that. And Rio's rants of the week. The proverbial Chase Young revenge game. Not a revenge game. Let's get this dub in New Orleans tomorrow.